I watched her adjust her wedding ring during my father's eulogy. Not nervously, not out of guilt. Casually, like it was just another accessory to match her dress. She was seated in the front row, beside my mother. Her head tilted just enough to rest gently against the man to her right. That man being my brother. My breath caught. My fingers curled into the wood of the pew in front of me. No one noticed. They hadn't noticed me walking either, which, I suppose, says a lot about the impact I used to have on this family. I wasn't supposed to come back, and they weren't supposed to look happy. 6 years earlier, I vanished. Not because I wanted to, because I had no choice. Because everything I loved, everything I trusted, was signed away like a bad lease. One morning I woke up with a girlfriend who promised forever. That night, I went to sleep alone with a voicemail from my mother that began with, "This is better for her. You need to understand that." I didn't. I still don't. But sitting in that church, as organ music bounced off the stained glass, and my brother held the hand of the woman who once told me she couldn't breathe without me, I understood something else. They didn't expect me to survive. And they sure as hell didn't expect me to show up. But I did. Not for them. Not for closure. Not even for my father, who once told me I was too sensitive to ever be taken seriously. No. I came back to see it with my own eyes. To feel the weight of the lie they built together. To walk through the ruins of my old life without flinching. My name wasn't on the program. There was no chair set aside for me. In fact, I had to stand along the wall like some forgotten relative from out of state. No one even made space. And that was fine. That was familiar. Then I caught my mother's eyes. Sharp. Calculating. Not a flicker of surprise. Just a thin, satisfied smile. As if to say, "See? You're still standing outside the circle." And next to her, my ex, now sister-in-law, blinked twice. Not recognition. Not remorse. But panic. It was fast, but I saw it. A crack. A hesitation. A glimpse into the soul of someone who had convinced herself the past had been buried deep enough not to resurface. Too bad I brought a shovel. I hadn't spoken in years. To any of them. Not after they did what they did. But now they had to see me. And I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. The service ended without a word spoken in my direction. Not even a glance from Leon. He held her hand the entire time. His arms stretched confidently behind her shoulders, as if nothing about this moment was fractured or foul. People stood, hugged, shook hands. There were murmurs of, "He was a good man," and, "I'm so sorry for your loss." All the rehearsed lines we use when we don't know what else to say. I didn't receive a single one. That was fine. I didn't come for condolences. I came for the silence after. I came for the moment when eyes would finally land on me and realize I wasn't a ghost. As they moved toward the reception hall, I walked out the side door of the church. I needed air, but I also needed clarity. And I wasn't about to find it under the same roof where the betrayal was quietly celebrated in front of a casket. Outside, the cold bit harder than I remembered. The sky was gray, just like it was the day I left this place. I leaned against the bricks and tried to ignore the burn rising in my throat. Not anger, not yet. Just something heavier. The weight of the years I spent trying to rebuild a self-worth they all crushed in one coordinated move. That was when I heard her voice behind me. "Wesley." It wasn't soft. It wasn't apologetic. It was unsure, as if saying my name out loud would break some spell. I didn't turn around immediately. I just let the word echo for a second, watching the fog from my breath dissolve in the air. "You weren't supposed to be here," she said. That made me turn. Slowly. Deliberately. Callista looked almost exactly the same, and yet completely unfamiliar. The same eyes, the same lips, but her face was sharper now. Like years of pretending had carved lines even makeup couldn't hide. She wore a fitted black dress with sleeves too tight and grief that didn't belong to her. "I figured you might say that," I said, my voice rougher than I expected. I wasn't invited, after all. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her fingers fidgeted with her ring, the one that used to be mine. Or at least, was supposed to be. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said eventually. "It wasn't how I planned." "Don't." I cut in, but quietly. "Don't do that. Don't pretend like this was some runaway train you couldn't stop. You didn't just vanish. You let her convince you I wasn't worth it. Then you married my brother like I never existed." Her jaw tightened. "You don't know what it was like." "No," I snapped. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to play victim in the story you helped write." The words hung between us. Heavy. Honest. She looked down. It wasn't about him being better. It was about survival. Your mother said you'd never have enough, that I'd always be waiting. And after a while, I started to believe it. There it was, the confession. Small, quiet, but it cracked something open in me. So you sold me for comfort, I said. She didn't deny it. A long silence followed before she whispered, "Why did you come back?" And I answered without hesitation, "Because your comfort cost me everything. And I want you, all of you, to see what survived." She took a step back. Not because I yelled. I didn't. But because for the first time, I wasn't the one apologizing. I walked past her. Back inside. Past the food tables. Past the pictures of my father. Past Leon, who stood frozen mid-laugh when he saw me. I walked right up to my mother. She was serving coffee like nothing in the world was broken. When she looked up and saw me, her smile never faded. "I see you finally decided to show your face," she said sweetly. And I replied, "Yeah. I thought I'd remind you what regret looks like." Her smirk didn't falter. Not even after I said it. Lorraine Dern had mastered the art of self-delusion decades ago. She didn't flinch unless it benefited her, and even then, only as performance. She poured another cup of coffee as though I were just another nuisance at her perfect little event. "You always did love dramatic entrances," she said, placing the cup on a tray with mechanical precision. "But you're a bit late, Wesley. The time to make a scene was years ago, when you still had someone to fight for." I didn't answer. Not at first. Because I knew that's what she wanted, to pull me into some childish spat in front of the mourners. But I had grown in silence. I had learned patience in the spaces where she thought I'd suffocate. I let the words pass like wind. Then I leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to watch one unfold." Her smile slipped for a fraction of a second, just enough. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her clutching her teaspoon tighter than she probably meant to. In the corner of the room was a long wooden table set with framed photographs of my father. Mostly staged, mostly lies. Him shaking hands with local politicians. Him at company events. Him holding Leon on his shoulders when he was 6. There wasn't a single photo of me. Not one. I didn't even feel anger. Just confirmation. "Wesley." My brother's voice landed behind me like a stone skipping across still water. I turned. Leon was still tan, still perfect in his tailored black suit, the knot in his tie centered so precisely it looked like it had been sculpted. He walked toward me like we hadn't spoken in years. Because we hadn't. Not since the day I left. Not since he called me a low-rent Romeo and told me to be grateful someone else cleaned up my mess. We stood a few feet apart. "You came," he said with forced calm. "Wasn't expecting that." "I know," I said. "That was the point." He ran his tongue across his teeth, a nervous tic he developed as a teenager when caught lying. "You look different. Hard to stay the same when everything you cared about got handed to someone else like leftovers." He glanced around, probably to make sure no one was listening. Then he stepped closer. "Look, I know how it looks, all right? But it wasn't like that." I blinked. It wasn't. No, I didn't steal her. She came to me. After our mother told her I wasn't worth the trouble. He looked away. That wasn't my fault. I almost laughed. It wasn't the sound I expected to come out of my mouth, but it came anyway, bitter, hollow, exhausted. "That's your line, huh? Not your fault. Just convenient." "I loved her," he snapped suddenly, his voice rising just enough for nearby heads to turn. "She didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck in some crappy apartment. She wanted more. And you weren't going anywhere, Wes." I took a step forward, close enough that I could see the crack beneath his polished surface. "You mean I didn't have a head start like you? I didn't have daddy's investments and mommy's favoritism greasing my future. I had to build every brick with bleeding hands while you floated above the dirt." He opened his mouth, but no sound came. So I kept going. And when it finally looked like I might be happy, she tore it out from under me and handed it to you. And you didn't even hesitate. For the first time, he looked ashamed. But only briefly. "People move on, Wesley. Grow up." I stared at him, then looked over his shoulder toward Callista. She was standing stiff near the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her, trying to act like she wasn't watching this unfold with dread in her eyes. "I did grow up," I said. "I just had to do it without any of you." Leon shifted uncomfortably, then turned and walked away. Just like that. Like the conversation had never happened. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. Because someone else had been listening. From behind a column, Aunt Marion stepped forward, my father's sister, the only relative who ever called to check on me after I left. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Something about your father." About what really happened the year you disappeared. And suddenly, I knew this wasn't just about betrayal. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. But there was something about the way Aunt Marian's eyes darted to the others, the way her hands trembled, barely gripping her handbag, that told me she wasn't playing some dramatic game. She was scared. Not of me, but of whatever she was about to say out loud. I followed her through the side corridor of the reception hall. It led into the coat room, quiet and shadowed, lined with musty old wool and forgotten umbrellas. She didn't speak until she shut the door behind us. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought maybe it would all be buried with him, but then I saw you today, standing there like a man returned from the dead, and I realized you deserved to know. Know what? I asked, my voice low, throat dry. She looked at me, her lips twitching nervously. Your father didn't want them to marry. He tried to stop it. My chest tightened. Tried to stop who? Leon and Callista, she said, as if it were obvious. He thought it was wrong, all of it. He knew what Lorraine had done. The manipulation. The interference. He told her she was playing God with your life. That she destroyed something beautiful between you and that girl. And Lorraine, she hated him for it. I felt my stomach not as her words sank in. She pushed them together, I muttered. But he tried to pull them apart. Marian nodded. Your father wasn't a warm man. You know that. But he wasn't cruel. Not like her. He told me once, over drinks, that he saw something in you he never had in himself. Resilience, heart, honesty. He was proud of you, Wesley. But he didn't know how to show it. A million memories swirled behind my eyes. Long silences at the dinner table. Dismissive glances. All the missed birthdays. The moments I told myself he didn't care, and maybe he didn't know how, but maybe he tried. But if he was against it, I asked slowly, why didn't he stop them? Her eyes filled with something between pain and guilt. He did try. He threatened to cut Leon out of the will. Said he'd leave everything to you instead. That's when your mother, well, that's when she did what she always does. She played dirty. I swallowed hard. What did she do? She told your father that you were unstable, that you'd been spiraling after Callista left. She forged hospital reports, said you'd checked into a facility, said you didn't want anything from the family anymore. She made you disappear on paper, Wesley, to protect her image, to protect their marriage. My knees felt weak. I sat on the edge of a bench, bracing myself. My mother didn't just turn Callista against me. She erased me. That's why no one looked for you, Marian added. She made them believe you wanted out, that you were dangerous. I stared at the wall, my mind racing, pieces falling into place like a cruel puzzle. So she handed Callista to Leon, lied to my father, and buried me under her narrative. Yes. And when your father found out the truth, it was too late. They were married, the family reputation was sealed, and he gave up. He never forgave her. They slept in separate rooms for years. He made her promise that when he died, she'd tell you everything. But knowing her, I doubt she ever intended to keep that promise. I shook my head. She won't need to. You just did. Marian's eyes welled with tears, but she nodded. I'm so sorry. I should have told you earlier. I just thought, maybe it would hurt less if it stayed buried. No, I said, standing slowly. It doesn't hurt less. It just festers longer. Outside the coat room, I could hear distant laughter, muffled music, the clinking of glasses. As if this was just another social event, not a funeral filled with rot beneath the polished surface. I stepped out, feeling something shift inside me. I had come here to face the people who stole everything from me. But now I understood that the theft was calculated, rehearsed, and crueler than I ever imagined. And I wasn't going to walk away quietly anymore. I walked through the crowd like a man reborn in rage. Leon and Callista were near the dessert table, pretending nothing had happened. My mother was holding court with two old neighbors, her voice sweet and her smile synthetic. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight up to the lectern at the front of the room and tapped the microphone. People looked up. Conversation stopped. And then, with my hands steady and my voice sharper than ever, I said, I know this isn't the time or the place, but since none of you invited me, and since none of you are going to tell the truth, I thought I'd speak now, before the next lie is carved into stone. Gasps echoed across the room. My mother's glass shattered on the floor. And my brother froze mid-bite, the fork still halfway to his mouth. Let me tell you all what really happened, I said. And I meant it. The silence in that hall wasn't just awkward, it was loaded. You could feel it humming in the walls, thick as concrete, like everyone suddenly forgot how to breathe. I looked over the faces in the crowd, all staring at me from behind their paper-thin mourning masks. Neighbors, distant relatives, business partners, old friends of the family who thought they knew what had happened to the quiet son. Most of them hadn't seen me in years, and I could see the question forming on their faces. Why is he holding a microphone? Why does he look so calm? My mother stood frozen, her lips parted just slightly, trying to calculate the damage before it began. Leon and Callista didn't move. Maybe they thought if they stayed still enough, I'd ignore them. But I was done pretending. I wasn't going to speak today, I said, my voice carrying across the wood-paneled walls. In fact, no one here even knew I was coming. I was written out of the guest list, out of the program, out of the family, years ago. And I'm not here for a second chance. I'm here for the truth. I paused just long enough to feel the shift in the air. My father and I, we weren't close. But before he died, he tried to make something right. Something most of you don't know. And you won't hear about it from the people sitting in the front row, because they made sure you never knew what really happened. There was a shuffle in the crowd. Some people exchanged glances. Others looked down at their plates. One elderly couple looked like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. But I kept going. 6 years ago, I was in love with someone. Someone who was supposed to be my future. And just like that, overnight, she was gone. No explanation. No goodbye. I was left with a hollow apartment, a voicemail from my mother, and a wedding invitation addressed to the wrong name. I looked directly at Leon and Callista now. They both went pale. My brother dropped his eyes to the floor. Callista didn't blink. Most people assumed I left town out of grief. Some thought I had a breakdown. Others, I'm sure, believed whatever story was whispered in their ears. But the truth is simpler and uglier than that. My mother decided I wasn't good enough. And she convinced the woman I loved that my brother would be a better fit. There was a gasp near the back of the room. A woman who worked with my father, I think. She covered her mouth with her hand. I didn't stop. My brother didn't hesitate. He took her, married her, and my mother told everyone I had chosen to vanish, that I didn't want to be found. She even fabricated documents to prove it. Now there was real movement in the crowd. Chairs shifted. Voices whispered. You could practically hear the legacy of my family's reputation cracking underfoot. I turned to look at my mother, who now had both hands gripping the edge of the table like she was trying to hold the earth still. Her face was a carefully practiced neutral, but her knuckles were white, and that told me everything. And my father? I continued. He found out. He knew. And he tried to stop it. He said he'd cut Leon out of the will, that he'd leave everything to me. But by the time he realized how deep the betrayal went, it was too late. They were married. I was gone. And she had already told everyone that I was unstable. A beat passed. You could have heard a pin drop. Today, I said, my voice steady, you all came to mourn a man you thought you understood. But the man who's being buried out there tried to fix something he didn't even break. He spent his final years living with a lie, all because he trusted the wrong people. Just like I did. And then I stepped back from the mic. I didn't cry. I didn't wait for applause. I just walked down the steps and into the silence. I wasn't looking for redemption. I was looking for acknowledgement. A small, sharp ripple across a pool of denial, and I got it. As I passed by the rows of guests, a few people avoided my eyes. But others looked right at me. And not with pity, no. With the dawning realization that maybe they'd been complicit. That maybe, by accepting what they were told without question, they had helped bury a truth too inconvenient for their comfort. I was almost out the door when I heard a voice call after me. Wesley, wait. I turned around. It was Callista. She was walking toward me now, her heels clicking unevenly on the hardwood floor. Her expression was tight, but not angry. Shaken. She looked like someone who had just remembered a dream she had worked hard to forget. We need to talk, she said, eyes glassy. I nodded slowly. Yeah, we do. She glanced around nervously, then whispered, not here. Upstairs. The office. It's empty. I didn't answer. I just followed her. The questions I wanted to ask had been waiting years for their moment. And I had a feeling the answers were worse than anything I'd prepared for. I followed her through the narrow staircase at the back of the church. The old wooden steps creaked under our weight, each one sounding like a confession we hadn't said aloud. Callista didn't speak, didn't look back, but her pace was quick, like she needed to get to the top before she lost her nerve. I hadn't been in that building in over a decade, but the space hadn't changed. It still smelled of wood polish, musty hymnals, and repressed truths. She opened the door to the upstairs office. It was dark, save for a beam of afternoon light slicing through the blinds, spotlighting dust in the air like tiny ghosts. The door clicked shut behind us. For a moment, we stood in that quiet, heavy space, both of us unsure of what came next. She finally turned to face me. Her eyes, once the soft, warm brown that made me feel like I belonged somewhere, looked tired now, lined with years of choices she hadn't stopped thinking about. "I didn't know your father tried to stop it," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't either," I replied. "Not until 10 minutes ago." She rubbed her arms, suddenly aware of the chill in the room. "You destroyed them down there. Your mother, Leon, they didn't see that coming." "I didn't come here to destroy them," I said. "I came here because I couldn't live in silence anymore." Her eyes met mine. "Then why did you follow me up here?" "Because I need you to tell me the truth," I said, stepping closer. "Not the version you told yourself to sleep at night. The real one. What happened back then? Why did you leave without a word? Why did you marry my brother?" She closed her eyes like the weight of the question physically hurt. "I was scared, Wes. Not of you, never of you. Of life with you." I flinched. "Life with me? You had dreams. Big ones. But they came with risk. With struggle. I saw you working 2 jobs, scraping by, chasing something better, and I started to panic. Your mother knew exactly where to hit. She told me I could love you and still ruin both of us by choosing you." I shook my head. "And you believed her?" "She didn't just talk," Callista said, her voice hardening. "She showed me letters. Fake job applications. Told me you were trying to move to another state behind my back. That you were going to leave me first." I blinked. "What?" "She said you were preparing to walk away from me. That she was protecting me from heartbreak. She said you wanted a different life and didn't have the courage to tell me." My knees buckled slightly, and I sat on the edge of the old desk behind me. My mother didn't just manipulate her. She made her think I was already gone. "And Leon?" I asked, quieter now. "I didn't love him," she admitted. "I thought maybe I could grow into it, but it never happened. It was a way out. A way to stop wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life." "And did you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. We sat in that silence, both of us tangled in different versions of the same past. She paced slowly to the window and pulled the blinds back with 2 fingers, watching the funeral guests scatter into the parking lot. "Your speech," she said after a while. "They'll talk about it for years." "Good. They'll paint you as unhinged. Disrespectful." I shrugged. "Let them. The people who matter know better." She turned back to me. "What are you going to do now?" I stood. "I don't know. But I'm done pretending I never existed." She reached into her purse and pulled out something small, a worn piece of paper folded into a perfect square. She handed it to me without a word. My fingers unfolded it slowly, and my breath caught. It was the letter I'd written her. The one I slipped into her coat pocket the week before she disappeared. A note I thought she'd never read. In it, I told her about the land I wanted to buy, the old cabin I found for sale, how I planned to propose after fixing the place up, how I'd already bought the ring and kept it hidden in my sock drawer. "You kept this?" I asked, stunned. She nodded, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "I read it after I married him. I kept it because it was the last real thing I ever had." My throat tightened. "And the ring?" She hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached into her necklace and pulled out a small chain. At the end of it was the ring. My ring. The one I thought she never got. "I couldn't wear it," she whispered. "But I couldn't throw it away either." We stared at each other for what felt like years, surrounded by the ghosts of choices we didn't make out loud. Then someone knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps that jolted us both. It was Leon. "Callista," his voice called through the door. "Are you in there?" She looked at me with panic in her eyes, but I was already walking toward the door. Before she could speak, I opened it. We stood face to face again, me and my brother. This time, with no guests to pretend for. No microphones. Just truth. "Wesley," he said tightly. "What the hell are you doing?" I smiled. "Making peace," I said, "with the parts of my life you didn't earn." Leon stared at me, that old flicker of superiority draining slowly from his eyes as the door creaked open. The confidence he always wore like an expensive cologne was thinning now, replaced with something far more unfamiliar on his face, uncertainty. I stood in the doorway, my posture calm, my expression unreadable, as the truth hung in the air between us like smoke that wouldn't clear. Callista remained behind me, still clutching the old desk, her breathing uneven. She didn't call out to him. She didn't move. That silence alone said more than either of us could. Leon's jaw flexed. This isn't the time or place, Wes. I tilted my head slightly. That's funny. I didn't hear you say that when you were standing at the altar with her. He took a step closer, but I didn't move. I wanted him to feel it, the weight of what he'd taken, the reality that I wasn't some name they could scratch out and forget. I was flesh and memory and pain, and I was standing right in front of him now with nothing left to lose. You've made your point, he said, quieter now. You showed up. You said your piece. Just leave it alone. You think this is about a speech? I asked. Leon, you didn't just take a girl I loved. You let our mother dismantle me. You watched her humiliate me, erase me, rewrite me into some story where you came out the hero. And now, years later, you want me to what? Stay quiet so you don't have to live with the echo. His eyes narrowed. You don't get to put this all on me. No. I stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind me gently. You stood by and let it happen. You married her. You never once reached out. Not when I left. Not when Dad stopped talking to you. You don't think that says something about who you are? He hesitated, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Guilt? Maybe. Or maybe it was just the realization that he couldn't spin this anymore. Not here. Not now. You always hated me, he said suddenly. You just covered it up with that passive little attitude. But deep down, you resented me for having everything you couldn't. That made me laugh, actually laugh. You think I resented you for the things you were given? No, Leon. I pitied you. Because you needed them. You needed the applause, the approval, the spotlight. I never did. I just wanted peace. And now you're here to blow it all up? No, I said plainly. I'm here to bury the part of me that ever thought I was less because of you. He stared at me, lost for words, and I walked past him. Slowly. Deliberately. Not in anger, not with revenge in mind, just clarity. That was what I came for. Downstairs, the crowd had thinned. Some people had already left. Others lingered awkwardly, the energy in the room fractured after my speech. My mother stood near the exit, trying to smile through the tension as she made her usual polite exits with guests, but I could tell she was rattled. Her carefully constructed image was fraying at the edges. I walked straight up to her. We're not doing this here, she muttered as I approached. Not in front of people. I shook my head. We already did. Now I'm just here to let you know it's done. She looked at me then, really looked. You think this makes you noble? Coming back like this? Stirring things up? You ruined today. You dishonored your father. I leaned in, voice low. No. You dishonored him the day you made me disappear. I just pulled the sheet off the body. She flinched. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I continued, you convinced a young woman that the man she loved wasn't enough. You turned a family into a battleground, and for what? Control? Pride? You won, Mom. You got what you wanted. But look around. Nobody's smiling anymore. There was nothing left to say. So I walked out. The sky had turned overcast, the late afternoon light filtered through gray clouds as I stepped into the cool air. My breath fogged in front of me as I reached the parking lot and stood by the edge for a moment, unsure of where I was going next. I had no home here. No gravestone to cry over. Just the smoldering wreckage of a past I didn't owe anything to anymore. Then I heard footsteps. Callista. She had followed me out, her coat wrapped tight around her, her face pale and raw from everything that had just unfolded. She stopped beside me without a word for a while, just breathing the same air, looking at the same broken sky. I can't stay here, she whispered. Not with him. Not after all this. I looked at her, not with longing, not with the hunger to get her back, but with the ache of someone who finally understood what could have been and what never would be. You don't owe me anything, I said. Not after all this time. She nodded, but tears slipped down her cheek. But I owe it to myself to stop lying. I didn't take her hand. I didn't hold her. We just stood side by side for a long minute, both of us staring at the exit like maybe the past would stop pulling if we just stepped far enough away. And then she asked, can we talk one last time? Not now, but somewhere real. I nodded once. Because even after everything, I still believe that honesty, even if it comes too late, is better than silence. And this time, I was ready for the truth. 3 weeks passed before we spoke again. Callista had moved out of the house she shared with Leon. Quietly, with no dramatic scenes or confrontations. She packed her life into boxes while he was at work, left a note on the kitchen counter, and disappeared from the world they built on a foundation of manipulation. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't need to. For once, she was doing something for herself. That was enough. As for me, I stayed in town longer than I thought I would. Not to linger in pain, but to give myself permission to finally say goodbye. Not to the people who broke me, but to the version of myself that had waited years for something they were never going to give. I walked through old neighborhoods, sat in front of the tiny shop where I once fixed bikes, stared at the windows of the duplex I had shared with her all those years ago. It wasn't easy, but it was healing in its own way. And then, one morning, she called. "I'm in Lingrove," she said. "Small town. By the lake. There's a little coffee shop here that reminds me of us. If you want to come talk, I'll be there." I drove the 3 hours in silence. No music. No distractions. Just the hum of the engine and a heart that, for the first time in years, wasn't weighed down with resentment. When I arrived, she was waiting at a table by the window. No makeup. Hair tied up. A notebook in front of her. She looked peaceful. Older, but lighter. Like someone who had been through a storm and came out clearer on the other side. We talked for 3 hours. No accusations. No tension. Just honesty. She told me everything. How she'd felt trapped in a life she never chose. How she woke up every day wondering who she might have been if she'd stayed. How the ring around her neck became less of a keepsake and more of a reminder. And how seeing me at the funeral, hearing the truth spoken out loud, shook something loose inside her that she thought was long dead. "I didn't come here to ask for a second chance," she said quietly. "I just wanted to be the kind of person who could say she was sorry." And she was. Truly. We left the coffee shop without a plan. Just two people walking side by side again, the past behind us but not chasing us anymore. That night, we sat by the lake, listening to the wind ripple the water. She rested her head on my shoulder for a moment, not as a lover returning, but as someone finally at peace with what we lost. I don't know what the future holds for either of us. I don't know if we'll end up together or go our separate ways. But I do know this. I'm no longer the man who disappeared without a trace. I faced the ghosts. I spoke the truth. And in doing so, I found something better than revenge. I found freedom. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.